There comes a moment in a man's life when noise stops being impressive. Not because the world has grown quieter, but because the ears have grown tired. Tired of promises that sound good but lead nowhere. Tired of urgency that pretends to be importance. Tired of people who speak loudly to hide the fact that they have nothing solid to stand on. When you're young, you believe that speed is power. You believe that certainty is strength. You believe that the one who speaks first, speaks loudest, or moves fastest must know something you don't. That belief is not foolish. It is simply unfinished. Time has a way of finishing it for you. Wisdom does not arrive as a revelation. It does not knock on the door with answers. It settles in slowly, almost invisibly, through repetition, through loss, through watching the same mistakes play out in different costumes. You begin to notice patterns, not because you are smarter than before, but because you have seen enough to stop being distracted by surface details. Most people spend their lives chasing clarity as if it were something external. A book, a mentor, a system, a new philosophy every few years. They believe that if they find the right framework, the right set of rules, life will finally make sense. But clarity does not come from adding more ideas. It comes from subtracting illusions. The first illusion to fall is the idea that life is meant to be fair. Fairness is a concept invented by those who have not yet been tested deeply. Reality does not negotiate. It does not reward intention. It responds only to action, consistency, and time. Once you accept this, resentment loses its grip. You stop asking why me and start asking what now. The second illusion is control. We like to believe that with enough planning, enough discipline, enough intelligence, we can protect ourselves from uncertainty. But control is a comforting story we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. The truth is quieter and harder. You can influence outcomes, but you cannot own them. And the moment you understand this, anxiety begins to loosen its hold. A man who understands his limits becomes dangerous in the right way. Not reckless, not loud dangerous, because he no longer wastes energy pretending to be more than he is. He knows where his responsibility ends and where fate begins. He works carefully within that boundary, and that is where real power lives. In your 30s and 40s, something shifts. Time is no longer theoretical, it has weight. You feel it in your body, in your priorities, in the way patience becomes both more available and more selective. You stop wanting everything, you start wanting the right things. This is not ambition dying, it is ambition becoming precise. You realize that most suffering is not caused by failure, but by misalignment. Living a life that looks successful from the outside while feeling hollow on the inside is a quiet kind of violence. And the longer it continues, the more it costs to undo. That is why wisdom often sounds like restraint. It is not about doing less. It is about refusing what does not belong to you. The world will always try to rush you to tell you that if you're not moving forward visibly, you are falling behind. But growth does not announce itself. The most important changes happen underground, where no one is watching. Roots do not compete with branches, they prepare. And so the first lesson is not about action. It is about stillness. About learning to sit with uncertainty without rushing to escape it. About listening longer than you speak. About allowing silence to do some of the work that effort cannot. Because a man who learns how to be still does not panic when the world accelerates. He has already made peace with time. At some point, a man understands that freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It is the ability to choose which responsibilities he is willing to carry. When you're younger, you believe freedom means keeping all doors open, but an open door demands attention. Too many open doors will keep you standing in the hallway forever. Time teaches you that every choice is a trade, not in theory, but in practice. Every yes quietly contains a no. Every commitment removes 1,000 alternatives. And this is not a tragedy. This is the structure of a meaningful life. Depth requires exclusion. Focus requires sacrifice. Anyone who promises otherwise is selling comfort, not truth. You begin to see how many people are exhausted, not because life is hard, but because they are scattered. Their energy leaks into obligations they never consciously chose, careers built to please expectations, relationships maintained out of habit, opinions borrowed because thinking deeply feels risky. The cost of this kind of living is subtle but relentless. It drains a man without ever announcing itself. Responsibility, when chosen deliberately, does the opposite. It organizes the mind. It sharpens priorities, it gives weight to days that might otherwise blur together. There is a quiet dignity in knowing why you wake up in the morning, even if the reason is simple, especially if it is simple. In your 30s and 40s, regret changes its shape. It is no longer about the things you did wrong. It is about the things you delayed too long. Conversations avoided, decisions postponed, paths half-entered and quietly abandoned. Time does not punish mistakes as harshly as it punishes indecision. This is why wisdom often speaks in the language of acceptance. Not resignation, but recognition. Accepting that some doors are closed forever, accepting that energy is finite, accepting that you cannot live every possible version of yourself. Once this is understood, envy loses much of its power. You stop comparing your life to imaginary timelines that were never meant for you. A mature man no longer measures success by intensity. He measures it by sustainability. Can this life be lived not just this year, but for the next decade? Can this pace be maintained without hollowing you out? Can this identity survive boredom, routine, and silence? These questions matter more than passion ever did. There's also a growing respect for boundaries, not as walls, but as agreements with yourself. You learn that saying no is not an act of aggression. It is an act of clarity. People who are offended by your boundaries were often benefiting from your lack of them. Letting that go feels uncomfortable at first, then it feels clean. Time continues to move, indifferent to intention. But once you stop trying to outrun it, you notice something unexpected. Time begins to work with you. Experience compounds. Small disciplines accumulate. Perspective deepens. You become less reactive, not because you care less, but because you understand more. This is where the voice softens, where urgency fades, where strength no longer needs to prove itself. A man who has accepted the weight of his choices walks differently. He does not rush. He does not chase approval. He does not confuse motion with direction. He knows that a life built carefully may look quiet from the outside, but inside it holds. There's a season in life when solitude stops feeling like a problem to be solved and starts feeling like a resource to be protected. When you are younger, being alone often feels like failure, as if silence were evidence that something went wrong. But over time, you learn that constant connection can be louder than loneliness. A man who never sits alone with his thoughts eventually becomes a stranger to himself. He learns how to perform, how to respond, how to adapt, but not how to listen inward. And without that inner dialogue, life becomes reactive. Events dictate identity instead of the other way around. Solitude is where the noise settles, where borrowed opinions lose their urgency, where the questions you've been avoiding finally have space to surface. This is uncomfortable at first. Most people avoid being alone not because they dislike silence, but because silence asks honest questions. Meaning does not arrive through achievement alone. Accomplishment can fill a calendar, but meaning fills the space between days. It grows from coherence, when what you do aligns with what you value. Without that alignment, even success feels strangely empty. This is why many men reach a point where external rewards stop motivating them the way they used to. The promotions, the numbers, the symbols of status still matter, but they no longer answer the deeper question: is this life true? Not impressive, not productive, true. The inner voice is not dramatic. It does not shout. It speaks in hesitation, in quiet resistance, in the subtle sense that something is off, even when everything looks right. Learning to hear it takes patience and courage, because listening often demands change. You begin to understand that meaning is less about intensity and more about consistency, about showing up for the same small commitments over time, about being reliable to others and to yourself. This kind of integrity rarely looks exciting, but it builds a life that can be trusted. There's also grief in this stage. Grief for versions of yourself that will never exist. Lives you could have lived but didn't. This grief is not weakness. It is evidence of awareness. You do not heal it by denying it. You heal it by integrating it, by letting it inform your choices without controlling them. A wise man does not eliminate desire. He refines it. He learns which longings are distractions and which are signals. He stops chasing novelty and starts cultivating depth. Fewer goals, better reasons. Solitude teaches this gently, if you let it. It reminds you that your worth is not measured by attention, that your value does not disappear when no one is watching, that a life does not need to be loud to be meaningful. And once this is understood, you stop fearing quiet, you begin to rely on it. Eventually, a man reaches a point where he stops arguing with reality, not because he has given up, but because he has learned where resistance is useful and where it is simply expensive. Energy, once wasted on fighting what cannot be changed, becomes available for what can. Acceptance is often misunderstood. It is not passivity, it is precision. It is the ability to see things as they are, without distortion, without fantasy, without resentment. From that clarity, action becomes cleaner, more effective, less emotional. By this stage, the need to be understood by everyone begins to fade. You learn that being misunderstood is not a personal failure. It is an inevitable outcome of living honestly. Some people will only understand the version of you that benefits them. Letting that go is not cruelty, it is maturity. Legacy also changes meaning. When you are young, legacy sounds like impact at scale, recognition, being remembered. Later, it becomes quieter. It becomes about the people who were calmer because you were steady. The problems that didn't escalate because you chose restraint. The examples set without ever announcing them. You realize that most influence is invisible. It happens in tone, not speech. In consistency, not intensity. In the way you handle pressure, disagreement, and uncertainty. These are the moments people remember, even if they never name them. There's also a growing respect for ordinary days, mornings without drama, work done competently, evenings that end without regret. This is not boredom, it is peace earned through discernment. A life stripped of unnecessary conflict reveals how little was ever needed to feel whole. A wise man no longer needs life to validate him. He knows who he is through repetition, not affirmation. He trusts what has been tested. He carries fewer opinions but holds them more firmly. He speaks less but with intention. In the end, wisdom does not promise happiness. It offers coherence. A life where actions, values, and time move in the same direction. Where regret is minimal, not because of perfection, but because of honesty. And if there is one quiet truth that remains, it is this. A well-lived life rarely looks impressive in the moment. But when you look back, it makes sense.